Hello and welcome to the Editing Podcast. We've put together a series of bonus episodes called Point of View, in which we talk directly to authors about their editing and indie publishing experiences.
This interview is with Tim Lewis. Tim hosts the Begin Self-Publishing podcast, and he's the author of 3 time travel novellas, the Time Shock series, 3 fantasy novels, the Magpie and Magic series, and a non-fiction book called Social Media Networking.
We chatted with him at the Atomicon Digital Marketing Conference in March 2019 and just about managed to stop him from interviewing us instead. Here he is.
2 editors walk into a podcast.
So this afternoon we're live at Atomicon with Tim Lewis, and Denise and I have both worked with Tim previously on his own podcast, which is called the Begin Self-Publishing podcast.
Yes.
But Tim is also a self-published author, and
Yes.
So you're going to talk to us today. Well, first of all, tell us what your books were, Tim.
Well,
were.
it depends on whether you consider writing in the past or
Yeah. We'll allow
but
that
they
one.
are still available for sale. Not many people want to buy them, but they are
We'll
still.
link to them.
So far I've written 7 books. The first 3 were time travel novellas, originally available as ebooks, but now available all bundled together as a nice paperback book. Then I wrote 3 fantasy novels, and my last book was about social media networking. So, foray into non-fiction.
Yes, and I think Denise, you featured in that, didn't you?
Yeah.
I am a little chapter in that.
Yeah. So my first question to you then is, Tim, why wasn't I included?
I put a Facebook post out asking for submissions,
My
and
fault.
I think you might have replied to it, but not actually said you replied to it.
Oh dear, I didn't leverage that. Didn't leverage it properly.
I think you might be one of these people who said, "Oh, that's a good idea," and didn't actually
Yeah.
say what category you applied to.
Okay then. So I'll let you off. So, Tim, did you use an editor for those books?
Yes, though I slightly cheated, as it was my mum.
Okay.
Who used to work in publishing in the 1960s.
Okay, so but she had all the skills. So,
Yes, exactly, yeah.
And that's interesting though, because you were working with a family member, and most times indie authors are working directly with editors who are strangers, and that brings with it its own stresses because there's trust issues there. But on the other hand, you are dealing with someone who's sort of dissociated with the book. There's no personal connection there. So
Yeah.
what was the experience like for you?
It was interesting. It certainly got better over the books. The first book, it was very much trying to set the sort of boundaries, as in like, I'm going to take your opinion on this and not on that.
Yeah.
Generally been pretty good, but I mean, this is one of the things I don't feel I could use another editor really.
Yeah.
And that's, in some ways, I was kind of like, well, but certainly for the like non-fiction book, I think it would have been better to use a different editor.
Yeah.
My mum's experience is why it was more in the fiction side. But yeah, you're right, it's different because the advantage of having a family member or somebody you're not necessarily paying, he says, to edit is
Not paying?
Yeah.
Did I hear you right there?
it's like the number of passes we went through was like
Yeah.
stupid number. Like,
Yeah.
we had 12 or 13 passes in the first books. That said, for the disadvantages, it's like somebody who's not necessarily tailored to the particular books you're writing. Like my mum was worse with the time travel ones because it's really complicated.
Yeah.
Right.
So it fell on me to make sure all of the kind of continuity.
Tied up.
Yeah, the structural work you must have done on that must have been
It's terribly
'cause
complicated.
that could have come undone
Yeah.
really easily if you weren't tight on it.
Yeah.
One of the things we often say to authors is that it's good to have somebody who's not, like by all means, show your work to your friends and family, but you're not necessarily going to get the most objective feedback. Did your mum have any difficulty giving you feedback, or did you find that
No,
it worked all right?
if you've ever met my mum, my mum would definitely, she's quite happy to tell me.
And what was that? Was that? I mean, you were obviously you know your mum really well, so you that didn't surprise you, I take it.
No.
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 And it didn't hurt too much.
Oh, no, some of it hurts, but I'm sort of,
You're thick-skinned.
I'm thick-skinned, yeah.
Yeah.
I've gone through a lot in my life, so I'm used to like taking it,
Yeah.
and then that helps actually, because I think from a personality point of view, to improve in anything, you need to be able to take criticism and not just sort of go off in a big huff and
Yeah.
sit in the
So
corner
you
for
need
weeks.
to be able to see the constructive element of it, don't you, rather than taking it personally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that is to do with the relationship between the editor and the person, well, the writer and the person
Yeah.
editing
Yeah.
the book. Because there will be some people who need somebody who's like snowflakes, if you
Yeah,
want to like
yeah,
a snowflake.
yeah.
And if you're a really hard person, then probably a harder person editing
Yeah.
can work
Yeah.
well. So I think that's kind of great.
And that does come back to what we talk about, of finding the right fit.
Yeah, it's not
editor.
about the best editor, it's about the best fit editor.
Yeah.
That's crucial, I think. Not so much with levels of editing like proofreading, but line and more
Yeah.
developmental work, definitely.
Yeah.
That best fit, that just finding, knowing that you can get under the author's skin as an editor, but from the author that you feel happy to let the editor
Yeah.
under your skin. And Tim, what have you found, moving on to the marketing side of things now,
Yeah.
what have you found to be the most effective ways of making your books visible?
Well, I'm going to say social media. But the trouble is, there's visible and then there's selling.
They're not the same thing,
Yeah.
are
No,
they?
I mean, my book, like that social media networking book that I wrote, it's got 20 people's submissions in it, including Denise. A fair proportion of those people like really tweeted it out, and I tweet like pictures of everybody all the time on the schedule, and I get lots of retweets and I get lots of visibility of that. Number of people actually buy the book on the basis very low.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, books are hard. It's a hard industry to be in because they're low-priced products.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like selling a £1,000 course or something where you can invest like £600 in advertising.
I think there's another element as well, especially with non-fiction stuff that's sort of marketing and especially social media oriented, that there is this kind of little bit of a culture of thinking, I can get all this for free.
Yeah.
People assume that, and actually, with most books, there's added value in there, which you're not going to get with the free stuff.
Yeah.
But it's getting people to sort of like make that jump and actually commit. So I think that's where it can affect sales a bit.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you had a considerable social media platform before you
Yeah.
launched that book,
Yeah.
and yet you still find the sales of it quite difficult. So that's another lesson for self-publishing authors, that the platform really needs to be there. They need to be creating that
Yeah.
before
Yeah.
they actually publish.
And it's
well,
a-
it makes it easier.
And it's a
doesn't
slow
it?
burn.
Yeah, and also it's like there is a lot about who are your followers. So I've got about 14,800 followers on Twitter. However, that number is deceptive because I'm somebody who follows everybody back on
Yeah.
Twitter. So I went use this tool Twitteronomy, which I use to check who's
Sorry, what was that called?
Twitteronomy,
Okay.
and it basically you can see who's not following you and you follow it. So I unfollow people who aren't like who follow me and then I'm unfollowed. But I have also, to make myself look a bit better in my figures, I unfollowed everybody who hasn't tweeted in a year,
Right.
and I lost.
You want people who are engaged.
Well, no, I want my figures to look better on the Twitter thing, really.
Bless him, he's honest, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I got 4,000 of those followers are people who haven't used their Twitter account for a year, out of 14,000.
Yeah.
And then there's probably about another 2,000 or 3,000 people who haven't tweeted in 6 months. So there's an awful lot of, you see these numbers,
Yeah, but they're
and
inflated.
actually, like half the accounts, especially if you had an account for a long time,
Yeah.
half those accounts,
They're dead in the water.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're never going to buy the book because they never look at Twitter.
Yeah.
They don't use Twitter
Yeah.
anymore.
And that doesn't even count the bots either. You
No,
know what I
exactly.
mean? Yeah.
And then within the remaining thing, there were a lot of people. I've been on Twitter chats, I've talked about social media, but I've also talked about books, I've talked about fiction. There may be people who follow me because they want fiction books.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, so then you have to split that audience down again. Like maybe 20% of that audience are people who would actually be interested in the book.
Yeah.
They're not all going to see the tweets and things.
That's the thing.
Yeah. Twitter's such a fast feed as well compared
Yeah.
to the other social media channels. I think
Yeah.
it's such a noisy channel.
And they say that like website conversion, it's like those figures are about like 2 to 5%.
Yeah.
So you cut all of these things down and you actually realise that you're only getting like 100 people who might actually, from
Yeah.
your social
Yeah.
media presence.
Yeah, and that to somebody who's inexperienced or isn't aware of that would be quite mystifying about why they have all these followers but nobody's buying, because
Yeah.
they actually haven't looked at how these figures break down,
Yeah.
and that their actual true market is much smaller than the initial figures suggest.
Yeah.
So it's about educating yourself about
Yeah.
these channels,
Yeah,
really, isn't
absolutely.
it?
Yeah, and also to like these processes do work, but they take a lot of effort.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of time. And yeah, I used to spend more effort on marketing my books. And I actually spend a lot more than a lot of other authors do.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly quotes from books and things I should be using. I've used that for my podcast promotion. That works quite well.
I see that regularly on Twitter.
Yeah, your podcast, which we can talk about in a minute. But I really like the way that you go about making that visible on social media, because it really draws close attention to sort of just really interesting points that people have said, and that sort of draws people in.
Note to self.
Yeah.
For future
Yes,
episodes.
yeah.
Yes, we'll be doing that.
Yeah.
You can have an honest quote from me saying about how crap my Twitter following actually is.
So let's talk about the Begin Self-Publishing podcast.
Yeah.
How long's that been going?
About 3 years now,
Is
I
it?
think.
3 years?
And you publish weekly? You
No.
broadcast? No?
I used to do it weekly,
Okay.
up to episode 100. Now I do it once every 2 weeks.
Okay.
I think you're allowed to go to once every 2 weeks when you put 100
Yeah,
episodes.
yeah.
We'll let you off with
Yeah.
that.
Well, it was the only thing I was doing. I wasn't writing any books. I wasn't doing anything. I was just doing the podcast.
Yeah.
And I will eventually get around to creating a self-publishing course at some point.
Yeah.
And a social media
Yeah.
course. So because that's one of the things about indie authors. So many of them discover that books are hard to sell.
Yeah.
But books are a fantastic way into other things. So like I got a speaking gig at Cambridge Social Media Day because I had the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have got that if I didn't have that book.
Yeah.
So lots of authors discover that actually they discover business, an online business, and then it's like, oh, maybe I could sell £1,000 training course a day or something, a day training course or something like that, rather than having to sell like 500 books.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the book, in fact, we were talking about this with another indie author and business owner, Antoinette Oglethorpe, and she was talking about how she's used. I asked her about how she goes about marketing her books, and she said, actually, it's more about how I use my books to market my business.
Yeah.
And it is that way of sort of seeing them as a tool in their own right, not just about using that content to inform readers, but as a way to show them other things that are going on in the business owner's life. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've changed the show format recently for the Begin Self-Publishing. It used to be I interviewed a guest about a topic, so that's when you guys run it.
Yeah.
Now I'm following people through their self-publishing journey.
Right.
So Ben Roberts, who's here somewhere. I thought somebody looked like him, but he's not. He's just published his Marketing Buzzwords book, and he's been like, so I interview him every couple of months about how he gets along with his first book. So that's kind of the format now.
Yeah.
Which is much more aligned to what the actual show title is about, rather than Tim interviews people he likes. This is a show. I may do another Tim interviews show on LinkedIn.
I'm glad we got in there early, Denise. Well, early-ish.
Just the right time.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. And so, have you found that? I mean, how responsive have authors been to? Because that's kind of putting themselves in quite a vulnerable position potentially by going through that journey with you.
Yeah.
Have you found it difficult? Oh, that's the wrong way of putting it. How easy have you found it to persuade people to jump on board with that?
It's amazingly easy.
Really?
People are really keen because they need, and it's ironic because I'm the worst person for self-accountability at all. Like, I'm terrible at getting myself to do anything. I had to put that social media networking book on pre-order to force myself to finish it.
Right.
But I'm good at accountability for other people. So that is the biggest thing, like, with people in this process. They usually miss the deadlines a little bit, but they at least make an effort, like the week before the interviews come up, to actually get onto the next stage.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I probably should be more caring and care about their personal journey, but no, it's like, you get the book done.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm very much, you do a plan for your book, write the book as fast as possible, do the editing, that process, because that worked for me, but it's different for other people.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question to the editors?
Oh,
Go on then.
When you have an author who's written a detailed plan, as opposed to somebody who's a pantser and just writes the book as, do you have a preference for one or the other, or?
That's definitely a question for you.
Yeah, I mean, with my fiction authors' work, I don't do story level editing, so I see the book once it's written, and it should have been through. It hasn't always been through, but it should have been structurally revised at that point, and then I work at line level, so I'll still be smoothing and looking out for things like repetition and point of view drops, but I'm seeing the whole thing. And some of those, I think what I notice is the pantsers, if they're inexperienced, like Harlan Coben and Lee Child are well-known pantsers, but they are really, really good structural self-editors, and so that shows, and that's why they've got these global author platforms. What I see with less experienced authors is that they haven't outlined, and they come a cropper because of that. Because I can't help them at that stage if the whole novel's fallen apart because of a big plot hole, or the point of view is so catastrophically confused. That needs It needs rewriting. It's too much to fix at line and copy editing level. So my answer to that, in short, is I prefer someone who's outlined. I think it's better for them. If you're good at pantsing, pants. But,
and as far as non-fiction is concerned, I think I'm just far more likely to see books that have been outlined. I think it's really just the nature of non-fiction that people generally have a good idea of their structure. It might need to be rejigged a little bit, but not completely redrawn. And again, I tend to come in later, copy editing, line editing.
And also, your authors are always writing from one viewpoint, like theirs as the author, whereas where fiction authors sometimes come undone is that they've got like 5 characters, and we know what's in everyone's head, and that can really lead to a sense of amateurishness. So,
That answer your question?
Yes.
Good.
How has this turned into Tim interviewing us?
That's the podcaster in him.
I
That's
know. I can't let it go. He thought, I need to control this. I need to control it.
So we've been asking everyone who've been interviewing about their one piece of advice that they would give to self-publishing authors. What would you say your biggest piece of advice would be? That can be about writing or marketing or whatever.
I would say most self-published authors should start with something short. In fact, this is true about anything, and I need to do it. I've got an audio book, my first audio book. I've got a short audio book, and I need to get around over the fear to actually do that. But having something short, it's going to be cheaper. You're going to learn all of the principles of how to do KDP and the formatting. And if it goes wrong, it's like, well, and don't do I was told this advice about screenplay. Don't do your great thing in your head. You think the best book. Never do like your real passion thing as your first project. Do something else.
Do like a taster thing.
Hone your craft.
Well, also it comes back to the you don't want to be told your baby is ugly with your most beautiful child. You want the small little one that's going to be
the one first.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
He's the most fun, isn't he?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
I think we could leave it at that.
I think we could. What a great way to wrap up. Tim, thank you so much for talking to us.
It's been great. Thanks, Tim.
We hope you enjoyed this author point of view. Thank you so much for listening to the Editing Podcast. You can rate, review and subscribe via your podcatcher.
And don't forget to share. Tell your writer friends, your editor friends, your business friends, basically anyone who writes.
And if you have any questions, please do get in touch with us via the Editing Podcast Facebook page. If you ask us, we promise we'll answer.
And we've put all the links mentioned in today's interview in the show notes so you can grab everything there.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.